Welcome back to the Sports Complex on a Monday afternoon. On the show today, we'll get into some college basketball talk. Texas getting the upset win over Baylor on Saturday at home. We'll tell you what that means and how they did it and all the reactions from that game, as well as other big play across the Big 12 and another big upset in there. We will get into some NBA talk as well, wrapping up the weekend, getting you ready for another week of NBA action. As the trade deadline is starting to loom a little bit more, we will get into the NFL playoffs and everything that went on this weekend. The Texans are done, but the future is bright. And some of those stalwart teams are still performing at a very, very high level. And, of course, your text messages, 512-447-3776. 512-447-3776. You guys drive the show. We just try to keep it on the rails. That means whatever you guys want to talk about, send it in the text line. We try to get to everybody here on the show. Talk to you guys. Whatever you want to talk about, we'll do the big fat poll of the day. Well, whatever topics we're on, let's go ahead and text it in. And a shout out early in the show to my man AD Hernandez, who actually does that song with the ADH Project. That was actually the Heebie-Jeebies, but he does his project, ADH Project, where they play that song live now. AD Hernandez, happy birthday to AD today. So happy birthday to AD, and always thanks. Thanks for the music. It's a very good tune, and so we played here as the intro. Text line's open. Whatever you guys want to sound off on, we'll see if we still get into Rodney Terry arguments today. I'm sure we will. But a lot to get into. Of course, NFL takes as well. Anything you got on NFL takes. Some news around the 40 acres in football as well. A lot coming around. Could get announcements on some other things for Texas football. I hope everybody had a good weekend, though. Enjoyed it. You know, the weather, it's a little bit warmer now, but now it's wet. We don't get a pick. It's not good. It's just still not good weather. Still can't really go out and walk my dog, which is what he especially very much wants to do, and I haven't been able to really do because we've continued to have rain or cold, and I know you can technically walk a dog like if it's like 40 degrees and they're just kind of uncomfortable, but they can still go walk, but I don't want to do it because I'm too uncomfortable, so I don't want to go walk 2-3 miles with my dog. So yeah, so we have not been going on the walks that we normally go on, so he is ready for that, so I'll be ready for it to stop raining. I'm sure everybody else is too. Get us back to that Austin weather that we enjoy. The players that did show up for Texas Junior Day this weekend, though, came in, and they seem to be enjoying at least the city of Austin and the 40 acres in Texas and what they could offer. A lot of good comments that you saw coming out of this weekend. And we also get a commit for the 2025 class, 4-star. He's an athlete. He's an edge from Texarkana, Lance Jackson. A big pickup. From the stuff I've read up on him, the people seem to be very high on him. He's a 4-star right now, could move up into that 5-star area of a player that, you know, a lot of people think high hopes for as that edge, a position of need for Texas that even though they're addressing it in the portal some and addressing it with some signings, you'd like to keep building up that defensive line and building up those edges as much as you possibly can. So good to get for Texas to get on the edge. Lance Jackson, the newest commit to Texas in that 2025 class. Let's talk some basketball, though, as Texas does beat Baylor 75-73 Saturday morning, which did lead to, a better Saturday. If I have to deal with my Texans losing, then the fact that Texas got the win over Baylor meant that I wasn't devastated by the end of the Texans game. I could deal with it a little bit better because I got the win that I really needed, the win that the Texas team really needed, winning at home where you've already dropped 2 at home that you shouldn't have dropped. And not against bad teams. We'll get into that in a minute, but teams that you should have been able to beat, teams, a UCF game where you had it in control and let it slip away. This is a Texas Tech game that you should have been able to be more in control of in that game. So you needed a big win here. They get it against a Baylor team. Both teams shoot the lights out in this game. Both teams did a huge percentage. Texas shot 9 for 11 for 3 in the first half, shoot 64% from the field in the first half, end up shooting 51% from the field in that first half. The three-point shooting completely bottomed out in the second half. One of the negatives we can find in that game. There's plenty to look at in that game and say there's plenty to still improve, but you're happy you come away with a win. Tyrese Hunter plays one of his better games. He's one of those guys that when he's off, it becomes much harder for Texas to win. because he plays, if his defense is better, then his offense gets better. He puts up 21 points, leads the Longhorns. Of course, that great play at the end of the game that was set up, and it was a missed opportunity from Baylor that they basically came up on Dessou, which they shouldn't have done. They should have played back. Dessou was not going to, shoot from half court and beat you, so you didn't really need to come up on him and pressure him, but that's what they chose to do. He's able to pass the ball off to Tyrese Hunter that now has a one-on-one with no real rim protection underneath to go after him, so Tyrese Hunter makes a cut to the basket and is able to hang there for just long enough to get the ball off, puts it up, and they win 75-73. I'll get to the negatives. Let's start with the positive. We'll start with the good news first, and then we'll get into things that Texas is going to need to work on to keep improving this team as you get into 2020, more of the 2024 Big 12 season. That wasn't a game that you can look at and say, well, the tide has turned and now Texas is away, but there are some positives. One, we saw Rodney Terry start to embrace the smaller lineup. We're starting to embrace where you have some strengths, and this won't be able to be done every single game because some bigs are going to come in, and, that was part of the problem with UCF. You got thoroughly out-rebounded. But you put in hustle guys out there, putting some smaller guys out there to stay a little bit more out of foul trouble, you keep your bigs be in the game. Dylan Dessou did get into foul trouble in the game, doesn't foul out. He plays with 4. They do have to do the substitutions at the end. But you see him play Kendall Weaver, who had a big game. He brought the energy. And his offense isn't where it needs to be right now, but his defense is, and his energy is, and his rebounding, and everything he's trying to do on the court. A huge play at the end of the game that's not really a stat play, but to poke the ball out and give Texas another opportunity to go score and get the free throw with no time. Those types of things where you're able to give Texas another opportunity to, instead of letting Baylor come down with a tie game and hold for the last shot, you're able to give yourself an opportunity. That was a huge play by Kendall Weaver. So it was good to see him get some more playing time, embracing your strengths. Whereas you would like to be able to go bigger because that's what you're going to be matching up with in some of these teams. And if you have talent and size, a lot of these teams just kind of size. They're not necessarily the most talented bigs. If you're able to play a Shedrick and a Dylan Mitchell and a Dessou together and then put Brock in, and you just have a lot of size, you can bump around with guys. That's the way Rodney, I think, would like to play, is a more physical, more rim-protecting team. They haven't gotten the calls this season. You haven't been able to do that. So starting to adjust that smaller lineup, having I.T. Horton come in the lineup, not a great game this time, but his defense is getting better. I know defense was not a strong point of this game. It's getting better. But Kendall Weaver coming in was huge. I was happy to see Chris Johnson get at least a little bit of play when you know that there's not enough depth on this team right now, and you have a talented young player. Get him in the game a little bit. And I know it's a home game against Baylor on ESPN. It's probably not the best place to put him into the game where maybe you could hide him away, that you're not, the feature game on ESPN, and, you maybe can get him against not the number 9 team in the country. You can give him a little bit more opportunity. But I was happy to see that Chris Johnson was able to get into the game because you just want to get him some more minutes to see if maybe he can crack in that rotation 5 or 6 minutes, and maybe you get a little spark out of him, and maybe he can keep progressing. And even if he doesn't become a piece that you'd like to see by the end of the season, by March, you'd like to be able to see him step up and become a part of that rotation because we know the talent level is there for young Chris Johnson. But we saw Kendall Weaver played 19 minutes in that game. That's a huge step up for Kendall Weaver. That type of, rewarding a player for coming in and playing those minutes and doing what he could do was a big step up. Brock Cunningham's minutes dropped down to 10 minutes. He just hasn't been the player he needed to be right now. Maybe get him a little bit more rest, get him a little bit, get him in the matchups where he matches up better against them, and get him a little bit more assimilated with this lineup. He's been a good field general, but he just hasn't been able to do it on the other end of the court right now, and he's going to need those things to pick up as it goes in. Plus, the refs really do have it out for him. He is bumping, he's going after it, and they do not seem to be caring at all about fouling him out of every single game. They don't seem to care too much about it, so he's going to have to continue to worry about that and working on that. Another big piece, a positive we can say in this game, 7 turnovers for Texas. And when things are going well, but the passing was so much more crisp, there was still ball movement. They do have 14 assists in this game, so you're starting to see the ball be able to move more. We talked about it with Max Abmas, that he wasn't necessarily the scorer as they were really trying to cover him. He has 7 assists in the game. So when Max Abmas starts to get doubled and starts to get, more pressure on him, or they try and put in the zone to get away from it, he still does go and hit 3 threes. He puts up 15 points, but you're able to see him get used in other ways, get to the assist where he puts up a 7, and that's a big help for Texas. If he can continue to learn more, play more off the ball, and get the ball to the right guys and then move around and make defenses have to guard different players, that's where he's going to become a really unguardable player, and that's how you start to get those wide open threes. That's, Steph Curry stuff of being able to move without the ball, and then when you have the ball, find the right guy, knowing that the ball will come back to you if you can get yourself open. But instead of trying to create in a double team or create when you're getting helped off of and there's a secondary guy coming off, get rid of the ball, shake that defender, and get back to at least a one-on-one, if not a one-on-one of a guy with his feet not set when you're catching the ball and you are in the control of the play. Those are the things that Max Abmas needs to keep working on. And if he can get there, that'll be a huge help for Max Abmas and this Texas team going forward. Texas wins points in the paint, 28-20. They win the fast break points, 13-2. To be able to be a faster team in the game, to be, able to get inside and get in the paint. They do hold Missy, the talented big man for Baylor, to 7 points in the game. He doesn't ever really get going in that game. Of course, Jacoby Walter went off. We know that he was playing well. He was somebody I would have not tried to get to go off, but that does mean they stopped Ray J. Dennis, who only has 2 points in the game. So there were a lot of positives in there. The negatives, we can easily see as well. They went 0 for 8 for 3 in the second half. You can't do that. You allowed Baylor for the game to shoot basically 50% from 3, 48% from the field. Those are types of things you don't want to see. You don't want to see that defense lacking at that ability where guys are hitting. And guys on both sides were just hitting a lot of shots. So the defense was there at points, and guys were having good contest. Like the last play of the game, Dylan Mitchell came out on a good contest on Jalen Bridges, and he just made a better shot over the top of it. So those types of things will happen. Those types of things, you need to shore up some. You need to get Dylan Mitchell to play a little bit better on that defensive end. You need him to be able to attack inside. He didn't necessarily have a great offensive game. We know that his offense needs to progress for Texas to be able to be a bigger threat once you get to March, and a bigger threat in the Big 12. We know that. And I'm sure they're working with him. I'm sure they're trying to get in that confidence. I don't know how many of the guys really have the confidence on this Big 12 team, on this Texas team right now. I think you need to get that confidence for shooting up a little bit more. But this was a Texas team that shot pretty poorly last season too, until they got later into the season, and that picked up and the offense picked up. So you'd hope that they'd be able to get to there. And again, I'll put in there, they have a new strength and conditioning coach here at Texas. And I think that, you need to keep growing that program. He does have college experience, but he was in the NBA last, and it seems like things are not being done in a way where Texas players are able to play 38 minutes in a game and be valuable in the second half the same way. Now, Tyrese Hunter was able to go down and hit the big shot, but he also airballed a 3 right before that. And, we know that he had the cramping problems, and it looked like that. He airballed a free throw as well, that his legs just weren't there for shooting. So if your legs are not there for shooting, is that the workout you're doing the day before or 2 days before? Is that something where you're trying to build them up and you're not giving them enough recovery time? Is it something that before the game, the warm-ups or whatever you're doing is using too much that they're not able to be able to shoot with the effectiveness in the second half they need to be able to shoot with, where the percentage is dropping a large margin on basically everything. I mean, they shot 64% from the field in the first half, 40% in the second, 81% from 3 to 0%. I mean, that's, as big of a drop-off as you're going to have. So I think strength and conditioning, it needs to be a growing process that clearly something is off in it. And this is a team where some of these players, we know Tyrese Hunter had issues with cramping last year, but stamina and airballing threes wasn't one. And I don't think he's necessarily going backwards, that you may be just having workouts at the wrong time in the week and they're just not recovering the way they need to. That rest and recovery, those processes, when you're talking about college kids, and I know there's NIL versus pro, where these guys have invested more in their bodies, and the guys who are going to be playing 35, 40 minutes a game in the NBA, like if you're talking about a Kevin Durant invests plenty into his body and his own strength and conditioning, his own things, where maybe a Tyrese Hunter and a Max Abmas and a Dylan Dessou and Dylan Mitchell, they don't necessarily have that. They're leaning more on the school to get them in that right place. So you're coming in with different goals and obtainable goals for this Texas team when you talk about strength and conditioning. I think that's something that they need to look forward to more and more as Texas continues in this Big 12 is how do we get Texas to be a 40-minute team? How are we able to have Tyrese Hunter play 34 minutes and not show complete, kind of meltdown in his leg power in the second half? How do we get it to where the field goal percentage doesn't go down? How do we get Caden Shedrick to be healthy and in there where he can play a lot of minutes, where he shows that he had some things. He had a great post move to get in there for a bucket, but that was really kind of his one main move. And other than that, you got to the free throw line. You got there enough times. You didn't get there as much as you like, but you're not always going to be able to do that. He gets there, hits 4 for 4 from the free throw line, but Tyrese Hunter missing 3 free throws is big. Dylan Nassau missing a couple free throws. You don't want to see that as well. For guys that, they hit more threes and they hit free throws, that's not necessarily a great sign when you're talking about what you're shooting. But a lot of positives coming out of it for this Texas team at the end of the day, that you can get the win, that you did hang tough in the second half when things were getting tighter, that you were able to come through, make a big play. Kendall Weaver with the hustle play there at the end to get the extra possession and not having to call the timeout, having them coached up enough before that to have the play of, okay, if they go down on Max, get the ball to Hunter, get the ball to Nassau, he's going to come up, feed the ball off to Tyrese Hunter, and if it's open down, if they collapse in, kick it out to one of your shooters on the side. But the play worked perfectly, and they didn't collapse in, which let him go one-on-one for the basket, gets it, and Texas takes the win there. I know there was more discussion after the fact. He came out afterwards about the horns down thing and apologized to whoever he offended. It wasn't the best apology in the world, but also I'm not as big on it being a huge deal. I'd like to see him show a little bit more fire in everything to get this team fired up, to realize that the start they had, they're a better team than that. It's not so much that it's unacceptable that what they've done. It's more that why are you not performing at the level we know you can perform at? Why are you not at the point where you feel every one of these games matters as much as it does? Texas needs to step back into that role. But it's a tough Big 12. It's a tough Big 12 this season. And we're seeing that across the league. We saw Oklahoma does get a win over Cincinnati, 69-65. They held Cincinnati to a really good field goal percentage there. Oklahoma's defense, who Texas is going to play on Tuesday, they're playing tomorrow night. They held Cincy to 38% from the field, 27% from three. Texas is going to have to be able to respond to a heavy defense on the road at Oklahoma on Tuesday. That's going to be a next big step for Texas. Can they get to that next step? We'll talk more about that game tomorrow. But they should be able to hold Oklahoma a little bit better. This is not a great offensive Oklahoma team. So we'll see what Texas can do there tomorrow. And can they get to the free throw line against an Oklahoma team that's going to play you a little bit rougher? Man, if you want to talk about defense, that Houston beats UCF 57-42 to get back where Houston is starting to struggle a little bit, lost some games they shouldn't have lost. They hold UCF to 15.9% from the field goal percentage. That's 7 of 44. They shoot 19%, 4 of 21 from three. They made 3 layups in the game. That's their only buckets that they made inside the three-point line. 3 buckets all in the second half. They end up shooting 33 free throws. They make 24 of them. That's how they're in the game at all, is half of their points basically come from free throws. Houston has 11 steals, 7 blocks in that game. They foul a ton, but they get the results, and they basically said, okay, we'll send you the free throw line, but you're not getting any other points. And that's how Houston was able to play in this game, making the refs make the decision. Are you going to call every single thing? And just played rough through it. Kelvin Sampson challenging the refs in this game and comes out with a win. It's a hard-fought one, but UCF only putting up 42 in that game. That is a defense. And if you want to be tough, you can't always get away with that, because I don't know if Houston or if Texas has the depth to get away with that, because once Nassau gets on the bench and then you're kind of stuck and Shedrick has to play 35 minutes, and I don't know if he's going to be able to do that right now. Those kind of, that scenario, Houston was able to do it with their depth. I don't know if Texas has that depth to really just challenge the refs like that. Iowa State, who's number 24, beat TCU 73-72. TCU led in pretty much every category, but lost this game. It was a weird stat line. It's a weird kind of game to watch. But TCU ends up with 27 turnovers in the game. 27 turnovers. That is far too many for any team to think about winning. But when you out-rebound a team Field goal percentage was better. You shot more free throws. Everything statistically should say that Iowa State wins this game, but 27 turnovers for TCU is one of those reasons why you preach controlling the ball and not turning it over, because those turnovers cost TCU in a 1-point game. And for everybody who hates on Rodney Terry for saying you cannot lose to UCF and you cannot lose to West Virginia, bring that energy for Bill Self. And I know it's a false equivalent. I'm aware what Bill Self has done. I think he's a great coach, but he is this season with a more talented roster than Texas has, lost to UCF and then lost to West Virginia as well on Saturday. West Virginia beats number 3 Kansas 91-85. Patrick Sumnick, the player who did really well against Texas, put up 20 against Kansas in that game. They just got out-rebounded in this game. Kansas did. West Virginia shot 57% from 3. West Virginia came out and they're going at people, especially coming into West Virginia. They are set up in a mode of desperation. You have to come in here. You're going to get into a fist fight. And I think just basically everybody's going in there thinking it's an automatic win. West Virginia has proved they have now beaten Texas. They have beaten Kansas at West Virginia. So if Rodney Terry did such a terrible job in those, so did Bill Self. And I know Kansas people are pissed about it too, but I'm just saying it's not equivalent. I'm not comparing Bill Self and Rodney Terry. I'm telling you that the Big 12 is going to be crazy this season, and there's going to be upsets across the board all season long. You got to kind of hold on. Now, do they need to get better? Yes. Are there plenty of other discussions? But should you fire your coach for losing to West Virginia and UCF? No, you shouldn't. And that's the point I'm trying to get across here as Kansas loses to West Virginia. BYU loses a close one to Texas Tech. Texas Tech goes 85-78 against BYU. Only 5 free throws shot for BYU. You can't do that. Pop Isaacs has 32 points in that game. We'll see if Cincinnati and Kansas can rebound tonight. Which team will? Back at Kansas is a big game tonight, 8 o'clock. For Kansas Cincinnati at Kansas, I should say, will be that game at 8 o'clock tonight. That'll be a good game to see if Cincinnati can come after a Kansas team that has just not played up to its ability, or Kansas at home should be able to handle the Cincinnati team. They played better at home, but on the road, they've had some problems this season. That game at 8 o'clock tonight in the Big 12. Of course, Texas plays tomorrow against Oklahoma. In the NBA, Spurs go 1-1 over the weekend. Wemby could only play in the second game. He is not playing back-to-backs due to the ankle injury, that he has sprained his ankle enough times, and there's a whole thing about, people getting mad about it, but the reality is the doctors are saying that, trying to give yourself rest time in between to let your ligaments heal properly is what they're doing. He should be being evaluated. They play Philadelphia tonight. Then they're home for 5 or 6 games. So he should be able to be reevaluated in that time, and we'll see if he starts playing more minutes. The minutes restriction goes off, and he starts to be able to play back-to-backs. He did play some early in the season before the ankle injuries, but they do beat the Wizards and lose a close one to the Hornets, and not a great road trip so far. Rockets also go 1-1 over the weekend. They do beat the Jazz, who've been stepping up. Şengün puts up 37 and 14 in that game. Jabari Smith Jr., 24 and 10. Jabari Smith Jr. sprains his ankle in the game, though, so he does not play the next night against the Celtics. Şengün goes off for another 24 and 12. But the bigger issue there in Houston right now is they are finding some talent. Şengün is stepping up at a high level, but Jalen Green is kind of a piece to the puzzle that they were expecting to be playing at a higher level. He's just not being able to step up and play at that level right now. And so the Rockets are going to need to figure out where to go in a lineup of Van Vliet. You know what he can do. He's not shooting threes great all the time, but the better the rest of the team gets, the better that will get. Dillon Brooks is having a decent enough season there in Houston as well, bringing the intensity and the toughness. Jabari Smith Jr. seems to be stepping into his role a little bit more. Şengün, you couldn't ask for much more than what he's doing. I think a little bit better post defense, but other than that, he's playing really well. It's that last position of Jalen Green, which is a top pick for you that you'd really like to work out. But if it doesn't, what do you do with Jalen Green? I think that's the question for Rockets fans right now. Spurs are taking on the 76ers tonight. It's going to be a tough one, but we get to see the MVP against Wemby, Joel Embiid against Wemby in that game. And the Celtics at the Mavs. Porzingis out with knee inflammation, but everyone for the Mavs, because of the Warriors and the death of their assistant coach, they were off this weekend, which meant they got a little bit more rest to get a little bit healthier, see if Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving can do some stuff with some rest. Trade deadline coming up February 8th. We'll get more into that as the week goes on, but let's get to Patrick's big fat poll of the day.
Patrick's Big Fat Poll of the Day on the Horn.
Patrick's Big Fat Poll of the Day today, talking about Texas basketball, and it was brought up of how many times Texas and Baylor have played and the matchups going back and forth, and a lot of great matchups right down the road in Waco. Makes you think. You also have a Kansas matchup in the history with Kansas. You know, you can talk about the rivalry with Texas Tech. A lot of matchups in the Big 12 that you may look at and say, you know what, even though we're leaving the Big 12, that might be a fun one to keep in basketball. I'm not saying in football, I'm saying in basketball, where you have a bit more non-conference and some more games you can put in there. So the poll of the day today, 512-447-3776, 512-447-3776. If you keep one Big 12 opponent in basketball, so one person that you say, let's keep this going and let's keep trying to schedule home and aways in non-conference play, what Big 12 opponent in basketball would you keep? Is it Baylor? Is it Kansas? I mean, I guess you can say Houston now. If you say they're right down the road, they're a good team, you want to keep them. Is it Texas Tech in that rivalry? You'd like to be able to, you know, you don't necessarily want to do it in football, but basketball, you can keep it alive in that. Is it a TCU? That's a game. You know, you say, okay, well, it's another Texas team. We can keep it alive there. I can't imagine it'll be Iowa State or West Virginia, but who knows? What do you guys want to put in there? What team, if you keep one Big 12 opponent in basketball, who would it be? 512-447-3776. We come back, we'll start looking at the text line and play some sound from Hook 'em Up with Ian Robbie. When we come back here on the Horn 1019 AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com.
Back on the Sports Complex here on the Horn on a Monday afternoon. We got a new theme of the week, but I thought, you know what? We got some guys listening on the text line, guys and girls listening on the text line. If you guys want to take a guess on the theme, I'll leave it at least till the third one. If y'all want to take some guesses on what the theme of the week will be. It's a little obscure. I don't know if anybody's going to get the actual reason for the theme, but you may get the basis of the theme. So if you want to play along, jump that in on the text line as well. 512-447-3776. We'll put it down there. Text line is open. I got some text flowing in. Keep Weaver in the starting lineup. He's not in the starting lineup. He's coming off the bench, and he's like the epitome of a bench guy, which is he comes in and brings so much energy and intensity. You love to see him on there. He's going to be diving around. If he gets the ball, he's looking for the best pass. He's looking to cut and dish the ball back out. Really what you love is a bench guy. And as far as if you could put him in the starting lineup instead of I.T. Horton, he's a little bit smaller than I.T. Horton. And also, I.T. Horton is a better three-point shooter. We know he can get hot. You have to go out and guard him because if you give him a couple threes and let him get some open ones, he's probably going to start hitting them and then could kill your team with 20 points. So Kendall Weaver's not that guy. He can't space the floor quite the right way. So you'd prefer to keep him off the bench. But I think that 18 to 20-minute mark is where you want to keep him. You want to get him playing more minutes coming off that bench because that's where he can really produce. So it's not so much, and he was in at the end of the game. And, that's what we talk about with those, the Spurs were the first ones to really make that big with Manu Ginobili. Manu wasn't a starter, but he was always in at the end of the game. And with Kendall Weaver, he may end up being that guy that at the end of the game, when you need the defense and you need the stops and you need that hustle for the ball, and who doesn't mind breaking a couple teeth for a jump ball that isn't even going your way? That's Kendall Weaver. So I think you could see him more in those end-of-game lineups that are kind of the real definition of, a starting lineup. We could see that one there. Texter says, San Francisco Shanahan Longhorn versus Detroit Campbell Aggie. First time this has happened in the championship game. Well, I think we're all rooting for the 49ers. It's hard because I know a lot of people are going to be trying to root for the Lions, but I guess that means Longhorn fans, we got to root for Kyle Shanahan? Or did Cowboys fans overseed the Longhorn in you and you root for the Aggie because you prefer the Lions? Look, I as a fan of sports, it seems like having Detroit in this makes it more fun. I like Kyle Shanahan. I've been a fan of Kyle Shanahan as a coach since the 49ers. So I'm on board for that. Not the 49ers, since the Falcons. I loved what his offensive play calling was there. What he got Matt Ryan an MVP that he could never equal again in his career. Those types of things. I love those. Chan says they weren't shooting well in the second half. Where were there any adjustments in the second? There were some defensive adjustments, but they just lost their legs. They were still getting open threes. I think Max Abmas kind of took some bad ones there at the second half too, and then they just got away from it. But no, again, when I say strength and conditioning, I'm just not a big fan of it, of those things. And someone says you don't like the water balls before the game. I don't know, because the water balls don't seem like they're going to blow your legs out. It seems to be more of a legs issue. That's airballing is normally going to be a legs issue, but who knows? I'm not a major in strength and conditioning, so I can't tell you that either. But that's what my guess would be. That's where I would look at first and say, let's just change some things up because I think we're doing a lot the right way, but some things may need to be altered. I do want to play some sound here from Hookem with the Ryder B talking about the Texans. We'll hit that. We'll come back, hit more on the text line, 512-447-3776. Let's do a little Hook 'em Up replay here on the Sports Complex.
All right, I want to talk about the Texans and their loss to the Ravens. First of all, the Ravens are just a better team. We've been talking about that all day long, and we talked about it all week long last week too. But I was surprised the Texans actually kept it close. It was a 10-10 tie at halftime, but after that, we saw the Ravens pull away. We even heard from Lamar Jackson about his now kind of famous halftime speech. We're from some other guys describing his halftime speech a little bit later on and who said that. But I always point out in big games, you got to break tendency. If you're going to win a big game, a lot of focus on your trends, a lot of focus on the patterns and the tendencies of teams, your habits. And last week, I said that, if DeMeco Ryans, considering the talent deficit, he's not – and the Texans are a good team. They won a division, but compared to the Ravens, they're at a talent disadvantage. And considering that, you need to gamble. You're going to have to gamble. You're just going to have to stay in this game. And they did. They gambled on defense early on this game. I said you got to blitz Lamar Jackson only because when he drops back, instead of having to defend 3 plays in one, you only have to defend 1 play. All right, if you let him drop back without a blitz, you got to defend the initial play, then you got to defend the scramble drill, then you got to defend him as a runner. And he's elite in all those categories. He's an elite pocket passer. He's elite when he's extending the plays, second reaction plays, and the scramble drill. And he's elite once he decides to tuck the ball as a runner. He's one of the more elusive ball carriers in all of the NFL. So you just don't want to have to defend all 3 of those plays or scenarios in one, because your defense will be worn out, and then that's the chance for them to get a big play downfield, because you got to cover for 7, 8, 9 seconds. Your defense is worn out, and then he starts tucking the ball and running, and your guys just don't have the juice to keep up, or you just can't keep up defending that scenario for 4 quarters. It'll just wear you down too much. DeMeco Ryan seemed to agree. Lamar Jackson faced a career high 75% blitz rate. He's the MVP, so, you only can do so much, but he had a 75% blitz rate against him, completing 13 of 18 passes against the blitz for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. He got rid of the ball quicker in the second half. The key was, in the first half, you were getting to him. You had 3 sacks, 11 pressures, when you were blitzing him in the first half. About 10 pressures is what they say here in Next Gen Stats. 10 pressures, 3 sacks just on blitzes alone in the first half. So and they only had 10 points. That was the key. And he took longer to get rid of the football. He was processing, not only seeing the pressure, but he's also trying to process what was happening with the coverages downfield. And he held on to the ball for 3.5 seconds on average. In the second half, he got rid of the football in 2.2 seconds. Which means he didn't have to process much. He knew exactly what he was seeing. They made the right adjustments. They went with a lot more quarterback run game, which with Lamar Jackson makes a lot of sense. And also, they had some great adjustments too in their red zone packages. But I like DeMeco Ryan's initial game plan. It was to gamble, and he gambled. It just the adjustments by the Ravens, and in the second half, those gambles did not pay off as much because they made, I think, the adjustments to the hot routes, to the screen game, and Christian Harris, who had one of his best games of the season, he generated a team-high 6 pressures on 13 pass rushes, the most unblocked pressure by any pass rusher in a game this season. So you had some really sophisticated pressure packages that were able to get some guys in there unblocked. It just couldn't last. You were able to do it for 2 quarters. After that, they were able to make the necessary adjustments, and you just couldn't defend Lamar Jackson in all of those different areas. Him as a runner, him as a pocket passer, him as a second reaction player. That's a lot. And there's a reason they're the toughest offense to defend in the league right now.
Yeah, and the stingiest defense.
Along with the best. They said the last time you had an MVP that also was paired up with the top scoring defense, they said it was Brett Favre.
Oh,
that was the last time you had an MVP paired up with a top scoring defense in the NFL. It's tough. It's just going to be really tough to defend that offense, no matter who you are.
Well, it's January too, and you go for 230 rushing yards versus 38.
Yeah.
And if you're Houston, you only rush for 38 yards and you have 11 penalties. So you're putting yourself against the change about a run game. Yeah, 8 pre-snap. To a player, the Texans talked about the crowd noise at MT and Bank Stadium, or MT Bank, or whatever they call it, was deafening. You could hear it even through the TV, and they were having a hard time. George Fant struggled. I think everybody took turns jumping off sides, and got a young quarterback in that crowd, in that environment. That's why the home field advantage matters. And it was unfortunate for Houston fans because it seemed like they'd have a good drive going. They'd cross into your approaching field goal range or even scoring zone, and then you'd have an offsides, and then you'd push it back, and then so now you're 2nd and 15 without a run game. I think Bobby Slowick's a really good play caller. He had a hard time at that point when you're playing against the chains, against a good defense, and that the other thing the crowd noise does, Rod, is that you jump off sides, but your linemen are half step slow getting off the line, right? Because now they're worried about jumping off sides,
exactly,
and
right.
that gives the defense the advantage and get immediate pressure, and they're really good. They're really a good team, obviously, giving up the fewest points per game. I mentioned this earlier, but as we get ready for this game this weekend, so we're now down to 4 teams, Rod. The Ravens have not played the Chiefs yet this year, but they have played Detroit and San Francisco, and now Houston twice. In those 4 matchups with good teams, Detroit scored 6 points. San Francisco scored 19. They beat them 33-19. Houston played them twice and didn't score a touchdown offensively in 8 quarters.
Wow.
And they combined to score 56 points in the 2 games. So they score a lot, and they're hard to get off the field, and they don't give up a lot of points. I mean, that's a great recipe to win a lot of football games.
Yeah, also held Mike McDaniel on that Miami offense to 19 points, too.
Beat them 56-19.
Yeah. So,
and it feels like they're getting better.
Shano, yeah. I mean, they definitely know. Mike McDonald, excuse me. He definitely knows something about defending the McShanahan tree of coaches. He's figured out something, because you talked about Slowick. He did the same thing as Shanahan, Mike McDaniel. The only one he didn't really have a ton of success defending was Sean McVay's Rams. Right when they got going, I think they scored like 31
points, yeah.
31 points, maybe something like that. So that may be the only one, but everybody else, even Ben Johnson, it's not from the McShanahan tree. He's just a great offensive mind.
6.
Made that guy look pedestrian. He making everybody look bad. And they're not doing anything exotic. I mean, they run pattern match zone. They don't blitz a ton. Hell, he had his second highest blitz rate of the season in the first half versus the Texans.
Yeah.
He's just brilliant at being able to really scheme up creative pressure packages.
Well, I think your assessment last week opened my eyes and was a great point. That the Rams, I watched that whole Rams game, and the Rams really picked them apart with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, and it's almost like, as you said, that okay, that's the McShanahan offense, that's Sean McVay, and they learned from it, because then they played Kyle Shanahan and stumped him. And then they played Mike McDonald and they stuffed him. I mean, now they're playing Bobby Slowick, so they have the recipe for that. Now you're going to get Mahomes and Andy Reid.
Yeah, and if they get to play Shanahan again, man, they said they got the recipe.
They do, and Lamar is playing really relaxed and really confident football right now. He's, his 100 yards rushing were killers. I mean, that's really. You said you like the Texans' defensive game plan. They just don't have the horses right now, especially a linebacker, I don't think, and. No. That Lamar just really what makes him a problem. I mean, you cover everybody, you do a good job behind it, and that guy's legs are still a real problem.
It's the biggest problem in the NFL right now. Like there's no tougher problem to solve than the Lamar Jackson problem,
because he can really throw it.
He can really run it.
I mean, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Isaiah Likely, Aguilar and Beckham. I mean, they got pieces, and they may get Mark Andrews back, and I would lean towards guessing that Mark Andrews will play, because he almost played in this game. And so he's got another week to heal up. I would guess you see Mark Andrews out there in an AFC Championship.
Yeah, because I guess you got 2 weeks before the Super Bowl, so you can put him out there. If he re-injures it, you'd have 2 more weeks to get him ready. But I don't think Greg Roman, and the crazy thing about it, Lamar Jackson about to win his second MVP, running a totally different system. Not a system even similar to what he ran. I mean, with Greg Roman, you're running 12 personnel, 1 back, 2 tight ends, 21 personnel. You're having more running backs and tight ends on the field than wide receivers at time, and he wins unanimous MVP running that system. And now, fast forward, he's basically kind of run the Kaepernick system from back in the day. Now you fast forward, and now he's running essentially Todd Monken's air raid offense, where he's spreading teams out. And then you realize, I don't know if there's an offense he couldn't run.
Yeah,
he can run all of them, but this one is easily the more dangerous, because Greg Roman was doing us a favor by not spreading him out enough. But now they still use the Greg Roman stuff. They'll still come out there with multiple tight ends and running backs, but now they can just come out and also spread you out the next down with 3 and 4 wide receivers, and that is just unfair.
Yeah,
it's unfair.
When he spreads you out, now you got a real problem.
Oh,
you got to have someone who can spy him or run with him, and who has that?
Who has that? Then they bring in dragging routes right behind the spy, and if the spy if he spend too much time and resources worried about Lamar Jackson, then I got crossing routes right behind him. If he's worried too much about the crossing route, leaves too much grass for Lamar, there's really no right answer.
It's good stuff, and that's why the matchups against the really good teams in the league have been really one-sided in Ravens' favor, including this one, 34-10.
Good stuff there from Hook 'em Up with Ian Robbie. Weekday morning, 6 to 11, right here on the Horn. We're going to come back, get into the text line, 512-447-3776. You want to talk Texas basketball? You want to talk some NFL playoffs? You got to answer the poll of the day. NBA as well. If you want to talk some NBA, if you're a Rockets fan, and you think you have a solution to the Jalen Green issue, or you're a Spurs fan and you want to figure out what they can do at the trade deadline, the Mavs got a big game tonight, what they're going to be able to do at the trade deadline, send that in 512-447-3776. Or the poll of the day, if you could keep one Big 12 opponent in basketball to do non-conference, who would it be? Send that all in on the text line, 512-447-3776. When we come back, we'll start hitting it up right here on the Sports Complex on the Horn 1019 AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back on the Sports Complex here on the Horn. It is, we're letting you on the text line. We're letting you on the text line. Take some guesses if you want to take a guess on what the theme of the week is. I'll let you take another guess. We'll go to the last song before we go ahead and tell you what the theme is. So keep that in 512-447-3776. Text line's open. Whatever you guys want to talk about, send it in. We'll hit you, reset it there at the top of the hour. We'll get into some NFL talk as well. I like this one. What do you think the biggest hole is the Longhorn football team needs to fill in the transfer portal? I would say the biggest hole right now, when you've addressed the edge, you've started to address the defensive back position. Jahdae Barron's coming back, especially if you get a Jabbar Muhammad, who has not said where he's going yet. There are still some other guys. I'm going to say it's the interior defensive line right now. Losing Byron Mitchell, losing Tavondre, losing too many guys that you're trying to replace that. I know Alfred Collins is coming back. You have some other guys coming back, but that might, to me, it was such a strength this year. If you don't get somebody in there, it feels like it may be a pretty big step back. You don't know what Alfred Collins is going to be able to do, but he hasn't been consistent enough. But that's where I would put it. If anybody else has another one, the linebacker position seems like it'll be okay. There's some good young talent in that linebacker room. Everything on offense seems like it's been replenished. You could use some more offensive linemen, but they're keeping those guys coming in through the recruiting classes, so may not need to hit that as much through the transfer portal. But I'd say the interior D-line would be my guess for the biggest area that they're still trying to figure out. But until they can name their next coach, which a lot of people think it may be Rod Wright from Houston, they just got eliminated, so that may happen, and then you will see the defensive line, that interior D-line get a bit more talked about and more in the transfer portal, more in recruiting, all of that. But right now, without a D-line coach, it's hard to hit that need. Text here says, on our question of the Big Fat Poll today, who would you keep in the Big 12 for basketball? Keep OK State. That's not the one I would have thought. I don't know if that's the one I'd keep. OK State. I don't know if they're a good enough basketball program. The rivalry's there enough to keep that. I think Oklahoma should keep that in basketball for sure. I don't know if they're going to allow them. I don't know if it's going to be like the Aggies where they didn't want to do anything with us when they moved, but that's one. Kansas and Houston are consistent benchmarks. Tech and Baylor are only rivalries for people in Lubbock and Waco. I wouldn't keep playing Tech just because I know it's only going to get more. It's too crazy at points, and it really doesn't serve you as much. Baylor's a really good basketball program, though, so I'm fine with playing against a good Baylor basketball program that's right down the road in Waco. That, through everything else, it's a bus ride away. That, for me, kind of makes it a better home and away than some of these other places where I have to travel a little bit more. Kansas seems a little bit further. I think Houston would still be in that. So I think Kansas you'd be okay with doing every once in a while, but it may be too much for either program that they want to play that type of program. But I think Baylor, for me, just makes sense of they're both good programs. Scott Drew has done a great job at Baylor. They're consistently relevant. It's also close enough that it's a road game, but it's not like, hey, we have to load up the plane and go to a hostile, super far environment, and you're just able to take the bus down to Waco, and they're able to take the bus here. That it makes it kind of make sense for me to keep those games. Texter says, I wouldn't keep any of those MFers. Yeah, and I get that too. Say, hey man, let's move on, and we'll reassess in a couple years, but not keeping any of them. I get that. Texter now says go Lions. When I was asking earlier about that the fact that you have a Texas coach in Kyle Shanahan, the Texter brought that up, a Texas coach in Kyle Shanahan versus an Aggie coach in Detroit, who are you be going for? And if you're a Texas fan, are you stuck up against it, or are you going for the team that's not the 49ers because you're a Cowboys fan, or you just want to see somebody different? And those Lions fans, as much as they've suffered over the years to finally get something going well, that team that we can look and then show Jerry Jones, hey Jerry, this team finally put football people in charge of things. And stop pretending they put football people in charge, and they stopped trying to do everything themselves. And all of a sudden, they're starting to become a better football franchise, and they're going into games that you haven't been to in a long time because you don't have football people in charge. You have yourself and Stephen Jones, and Will McClay's a great voice, but you need to have more football people in charge of everything. But he's not going to do that. He's not going to do that. We know he's not going to do that. Chan says, Kendall Weaver, Texas men's basketball, junkyard dog. Love it. Yeah, Kendall Weaver is killing it right now. He was one of those guys you could see early in the season that you like to see his energy and intensity, and he is a guy that will go down and get anything, get on the floor. He'll go after it, and you want to see those kind of plays. And exactly, the play at the end of the game is a perfect example of that type of player mixed with intelligence, that he's able to poke the ball back out to Max Abmas to keep that ball alive, but not do it where he hit it back to the backcourt and it's 2 points going the other way, which is a very possible thing that you can do when you're trying to make that big play, that you overdo it. I think, he shot some threes earlier in the season. It seems like that green light for the three-pointer is no longer there in Big 12 play. I'd like to be able to see if he can kind of get the practice, get the three-point percentage up enough that they allow him to shoot a few threes, see if he can get that going. Because if he can hit a few threes, then that means it opens up a lot more, because now he's someone that can continue to stretch the floor. And you know what they talk about in the NBA, 3-and-D, man. Can you be a 3-and-D player? And Dylan Mitchell, if he could be a 3-and-D guy right now, then everybody would love it. And if you get Kendall Weaver and you just make him 3-and-D guys, it's that three-point shot's difficult to keep growing during the regular season. But man, if you're Texas, you got to keep pushing that. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get back to the text line. 512-447-3776 is the text line number. We'll get back to that. Talk some NFL as well. Reset everything when we get back here on the Sports Complex in the Horn 1019, AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Hour 2 here on the Sports Complex on a Monday afternoon. Getting to some more NFL talk. We already talked some Texas basketball, so if you want to do that, hit that up on the text line. We'll keep talking about it. 512-447-3776. Going to get into the NFL. A little more Texas football news. Have not seen any news come across about any possible hires, but maybe here in the next day or so, we'll see that hiring of a defensive line coach hits because, Texas needs to start working on that interior D-line and replacing that interior D-line as it continues to go. As we get into more of we're starting to get into the next semester, and the transfer portal is not necessarily going to be there, but we still don't even know Jim Harbaugh. Where does he go? And you're able to steal anybody out of Michigan if Jim Harbaugh does end up taking a job in the NFL, and there might be a new opportunity in the NFL. We'll get into that. But text line's open, 512-447-3776, whatever you guys want to talk about. If you guys want to talk about Texas basketball, Texas football, NBA basketball, Spurs, Rockets, Mavs, any of that, you want to text about that. Texas football, of course. I'll get into our NFL takes in our big fat poll today because Texas just played Baylor, and I think that's actually a pretty decent matchup to keep on the schedule if you want to. If you're Texas, right down the road, pretty even matchup, good teams, a lot at Baylor, and, beatable teams, but good teams. Some good matchups, a really good coach in Scott Drew that is there. Then I'd say that's a decent matchup to keep. But I'm asking you, if you could keep one matchup in the Big 12 for basketball, not for football, but for basketball, what matchup in the Big 12 would you keep as Texas goes to the SEC next season? So let us know on the text line, 512-447-3776. To reset a little bit of the Texas football news, if you missed it over the weekend, Texas got a commit from a 2025 athlete/edge, a 4-star from Texarkana, Lance Jackson, made the commitment to Texas this weekend, adding more on that edge position and just a big athlete guy to get in there. A lot of people talking very highly about Lance Jackson, so if he's able to come in and make an impact on this roster sooner rather than later, that would be big for Texas. They're trying to grow that edge position and make that more of a strength and a weakness that has been for the last several years. And Junior Day was this weekend, this Saturday at Texas, and lots of good reports from the students that came in, showing them the facilities and everything that Texas can do, talking to the coaches, and just getting those guys. It's a big step forward for Texas. The more big names you can get in these classes to come visit Texas, the better it is for your program, because then you can start to evaluate these kids as people. You can start to evaluate these kids a little bit more, getting to know them, and have an edge in recruiting when other schools are starting to reach out. When a position opens up for them, you've already got an inside track. So it's big that Texas is able to do those kind of things and continue to grow there. All right. Let's talk a little NFL before we get back to the text line, 512-447-3776. Recap a little bit of what happened this weekend. I'm pretty sure you guys all know, if you're listening to the Sports Complex, you probably watched some football this weekend. I'm going to assume you watched some football this weekend. Maybe you didn't. But the Ravens do take care of business, 34-10 against the Texans. It was tight at half. A good fight from this Texans team, especially the defense in that first half to keep them in the game. It was just too much. The Texans, at the end of the day, went up against a very good Baltimore team that you needed to not be just as on point as they were in that game. Texans' only touchdown comes from a Steven Sims punt returns. The offense is just never able to get down there, and when they do, the penalties killed them over and over again. The penalties for this Texans team, they had 11 penalties for 70 yards, and so many of them were drive killers and pushing you back at points where you get into field goal range, and all of a sudden you're back out and you're trying to pick up a first down, but you really need to pick up 9 yards for a field goal. And once you got in that second half, it was not really able to happen. And then on the other side of the ball, the Baltimore Ravens were just able to run the ball all game long. 229 rushing yards for Baltimore in the game. Lamar Jackson's 100 of those. Just being able to, when you spread the ball out, everyone's out there trying to do whatever you can, and eventually he'd be able to find the hole and just take off for 30, 40 yards is what he does so well in this offense. But, something that, Lamar Jackson is really the best at doing, which is being able to kill you if you get outside, and he was able to kind of pick apart this offense slowly. If you tried to play conventionally, he was able to go across and still pick up yardage And when they would start to try and throw the ball deep, Texans would try and overcover there, and Lamar Jackson was able to get out there. They just overmatched them. This is a team that's been building for several years, and I know they have a new offensive coordinator there, but they've been building this team for quite a while, and the Texans are 1 year in. So not the worst thing in the world. Texans are also going to have to figure out that run game. As good as Singletary had been throughout the season, it was getting better as the season went on. He only averages 2.4 yards per carry in this game, 9 carries for 22 yards. Not going to be able to get it done. You saw a lot of these games, the run, being able to run the ball, not only is able to win you games, it's able to keep you in games. And the Texans just didn't have that ability this year. It's something that's going to be addressed in the offseason. They have the third most cap room of any teams in the NFL right now. So they have a lot of room to go out there, try and figure out what you're going to be able to do in the run game, and try and help this team advance forward as they continue to go in this offseason. Will Anderson told the story that he was pretty down and he was crying in the locker room after the game, and he looked at C.J. Stroud, who's pretty stoic. And when he asked him about what it meant and why was he not, as upset, he said, "Oh, we'll be good." And that's kind of the thought. You look at this game and you can look at it one side and say that Baltimore team is really good, and they're going to have a heck of a game coming up this week against a Chiefs team that has just dominated the AFC for years now. Can they change that script for the Ravens? And on the other side, the Texans are up and coming. That was a first-year team with a first-year coach and a first-year quarterback, and a lot of guys, turned this program around. But as a Texans fan, you have to say that it was a great year for Texans because you took a program that losing begets losing, and the more you lose, the more it's hard to change that culture around. And in one offseason, with one big trade and one swing of the bat, they really changed the mood around the team of bringing in a coach who wanted to change up the philosophy and change up what was happening back, behind the curtain. And on the flip of that, to show that the team is ready to go all in and make a big trade and believe in the team, and it panned out. You bet on yourself and traded your pick instead of the Browns pick, and it ends up that you have you kept the better pick, and no one saw that coming at the beginning of the year. So for Texans and for the fans and everybody in Houston, it is a bright side. It's disappointing to lose, but if you're going to lose, you'd like to lose to a really good team that, you just felt a bit outmatched in that game. The Ravens are going to have a great matchup, and we'll get more into that with the Chiefs coming up. But if you talk about run game and keeping you in games, that is what the Packers were able to do. Jones for the Packers, Aaron Jones just kills it again, averaging 6 yards a carry, 18 carries for 108. And I mean, just basically he's able to keep them in a game where it's wet and, you're not able to get it going. Jordan Love had a pretty decent game, 194. He has 2 interceptions in the game, 2 touchdowns as well. Brock Purdy, again, doesn't look great. 252, 1 touchdown, and 1 sack. That is one thing. Again, C.J. Stroud did not pick up a sack in that game. Jordan Love wasn't sacked. These guys, the new offensive minds are finding ways to not get their quarterback sacked, but you're going to have to get that run game. The Packers have it. They're in the game. 49ers are just able to do a little bit more at the end of the game. You can't turn the ball over if you're Jordan Love. But another team that is headed forward right now, and this 49ers team with Deebo Samuel and the injury that he's 50-50 going into the game, with Brock Purdy probably have the least confidence he has had in quite some time at the quarterback position, there are questions starting to be asked of this 49ers team going up against the Lions team that seems to be riding pretty high. Because the Buccaneers are lose to Lions 31-23. Baker Mayfield really tries to go for it, throws a last-minute interception that ends the game, has 3 TDs in it. I felt like there was a little bit too much of reliance on Baker Mayfield in this game, and he had a good game. But Rachaad White was averaging 6.1 yards per carry, and you only ran him 9 times. I think the Buccaneers should have run the ball a little bit more, tried to run the clock out, tried to keep the ball on the ground in a little bit safer play than continuing to put the ball up. I know Mike Evans is a beast. If the Buccaneers don't keep him, that is a guy that would look really good in a Texans jersey next season. I can tell you that much. Chase Edmonds also averaged 4.8 yards per carry. Like they were being able to run the ball on this Lions team, and that's what you worry about the matchup coming up next week. That the 49ers may be able to get a better run defense than they were, or run game going than they were against the Packers against this Lions team. But the Lions do get the win. They're going on for this Detroit team. It is a season of destiny is what it feels like. Jared Goff playing pretty well right now, and looks like that the Packers are going to be able to, or the 49ers and the Lions is going to be another great matchup as well. And finally, the Chiefs and the Bills, 27-24 Chiefs in that game. The phrase that Bills fans hate more than any other phrase in sports, wide right. Wide right is a phrase that has haunted that team for years. It haunts them again as they lose by 3 after a Bills missed field goal. Now, Kansas City was going to have the ball and the chance to come down and get the win at the end. But in reality, Josh Allen does, 186 through the air, 72 through the ground on that game. But Patrick Mahomes is just too good in these games. He's able to get it done. Pacheco is playing out of their mind right now. And if you're the Bills, this starts to bring up some questions. This starts to go again, and it's not Josh Allen. I as much as people want to put it on the turnovers and everything else, he did have a turnover that was really close to him hitting that narrative again of costing his team the game. But I think now you look at it and you see that him and Diggs weren't able to connect. He had 8 targets. Stephon Diggs did 3 catches. That's not what you need to be able to see. Only 21 yards through the air for that combination with Gabe Davis out. It just wasn't quite enough to get it done for Josh Allen. You need the weapons, even if you are a top talent at the position. And Patrick Mahomes is not a guy who needs the talent. He got Rashee Rice, and he feels just fine now with Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce. But it brings up the question for this Bills team. Is Sean McDermott safe now? The same question we asked for Nick Sirianni in Philly, the same question we asked for Mike McCarthy in Dallas. You're supposed to be playing in the Super Bowl. This is the time you're supposed to be all in and playing in the Super Bowl. Are you going to be able to get to that level? And right now, the Bills have not been able to do it. The Bills, again, lose to the Chiefs. And Sean McDermott, you can say, had some good things going for him. He did build the team. Joe Brady, I think, underrated as an offensive coordinator coming in midway through the season. Joe Brady, who was thrown under the bus by Matt Rule last year in Carolina and kind of, came out of LSU, and then it fell into it was all, the Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow. It wasn't really Joe Brady, but he's turned it around. He got them a running game they hadn't had for years, and the team's starting to look better in places, but can't quite get over that hump. Is there time you move on? And if you're moving on, is it because you feel that you were in a contest to get Bill Belichick or Jim Harbaugh? And personally, I don't think Bill Belichick, this would be his top job. I think he would like it, but it's a lot of players that kind of are built in their way. It would be a harder change of culture for a Bill Belichick, and it's also a divisional rival of his. So he knows him a little bit better, but I'm not sure that he would want to go and, play in the division with the Patriots. I don't know if he would. He may want that more. He may be vindictive, and at the end of the day say, you know what, if I can go show Robert Kraft that he shouldn't have got rid of me, maybe he will. Maybe that's the guy they go out and make a phone call to and just judge interest. Jim Harbaugh, if you say, okay, well, you want to go to the Chargers, well, they don't have a culture. You can come in here, and we were kind of already we have a culture. We have some things going for us, and we got a top quarterback. We've got all the things you could want here as well in Buffalo, and you can come be crazy here, and the fan base will eat it up. Your eccentricities here in LA, they may not. You may not have the fan base, but here, your fan base will live and die for you here. I think that's somebody if I'm Buffalo and I know this guy's a winner, I'm at least going to look at it. I don't know, because I don't think if you fire Sean McDermott and you don't get Jim Harbaugh or Bill Belichick, then you probably screwed up. You're too late in this scenario to go get another great coach. I don't know who else you're going to be able to get at that position, but I think it's worth a look at. That if you look at the numbers, and Rob Ayers always bring these numbers out of, how long a quarterback and a coach can go before that scenario never ends in a Super Bowl. And it feels like we're well past that. It feels like we're past it. And I know there was tons of injuries for Buffalo, so it's a bit of an overreaction. Sean McDermott's done a good job. But man, does it not make you want to think about it? Do you not want to just kind of just judge it and maybe we'll see, maybe we can do it, maybe? Let me know what you think on the text line. 512-447-3776 is the text line number. We're asking if you got any takes on college basketball, Texas basketball, Texas football, NBA, anything you want to throw in there. And the big fat poll of the day today, if you keep one Big 12 opponent in basketball, who would it be? Who would be the opponent you would keep if you could take one of them in Big 12 play and keep them as you move to the SEC, who would that be? 512-447-3776 is the text line number. All right. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we will get into a little behind the burnt orange curtain with Rob Avers and EOC and the text line 512-447-3776. We come back here on the Sports Complex on the Horn 1019 and 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. Back on the Sports Complex here on the Horn. I don't know if any of you guys put it together what the theme of the week is, but the theme of the week is Blood Donation Month or Blood Donor Month celebration in January. And I was talking to somebody this weekend about donating blood and the good it can do, and they're trying to get more people to do it. So I said we would promote it this week, donating blood. So the songs were all about blood this week as we talk about donating blood. Great cause that you can do. And hats off to everybody who does donate blood regularly. Hats off to you guys. But yeah, that's what we're playing. Hot Blooded and Bloody Mary Morning from Willie Nelson and Raining Blood by Slayer. Some good stuff. We'll play blood songs all week long. You know, keeping it positive with the blood. It's a good thing to do. Text line's open, 512-447-3776 is the text line. The big fat poll of the day today is, if you could keep one Big 12 opponent in basketball, who would it be? What is the Big 12 opponent you would keep in basketball since Texas is going to the SEC? Not going to be playing any. I think Baylor, for me, is probably the one I would keep. I know it's not the sexiest matchup, but a Kansas team is a bit further away with the travel and everything else you have to do. Plus, they're a Kansas team that, you know, you don't want to put one that's you know, they're a perennial power. Houston, I think, is another good one. We just don't have the history with Houston, and they're also a really good defensive team, which could be annoying early in the season. A loss where, again, the stats they put up against UCF, I mean, they allowed 3 layups. That's the only 3 buckets that were made. And UCF shot a lot of free throws, but they did not allow a bucket inside the 3-point line in the first half. They allowed 3 layups in the second half. That's it. That is a crazy stat to look at. So I think Baylor's the one where you go, okay, maybe Baylor would be a fun one. It's right down the road. You know, you've played them tons of times before. Decent matchup. Fan base isn't crazy that they're going to, you know, it's not a Texas Tech fan base that, you know, you might be getting phone calls and death threats and stuff like that. So, you know, I that's what I have. But let me know what you guys think on that one. Random texter number 69 says, let's keep Houston. Maybe not the obvious choice, but that FCC travel schedule is always going to be really tough. Is going to be rough enough. And who really wants to go to Lubbock anyway? Off topic. Prop bet odds for Taylor Swift in a box at this year's Super Bowl because KC made it. I'm sure the NFL execs are praying that happens. I believe she starts her tour. I believe I've heard this. I've not looked into this, but I've heard that she starts her tour and would be in Japan, I believe, when the Super Bowl is. So she would not be there. So they will be cutting to a Zoom of her watching the game in Japan. They'll find a way to show her, but I believe she is not going to be in the States at the time the Super Bowl is happening. So, random texter number 69, I don't know if we'll be able to see that. But yes, if she's in town, of course she'll be there, and they'll show her the whole time. And they'll put Jason Kelsey in there with no shirt on because that was just hilarious fun. Texter says, Kansas, another team that you could add in there. It's a great matchup. I mean, those matchups have been huge. I don't know if they carry the same weight non-conference as they do as those last games of the season when, like that game last season that kind of spurred Texas on to an Elite Eight run with that big win against Kansas at the end of the season. But I like it. Keep Baylor since it's the closest. Again, it's a bus ride. It's a bus ride trip for both teams, the home and away. It seems like Baylor would be more open to doing it than some of these other schools would be as well. Texter says, keep Tech. I'm guessing this is from a Tech fan, though. That 903 area code, I'm going to guess is Lubbock. I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm going to assume it's Lubbock. That you want to keep it because you're a Tech fan and you want to keep that Tech game. I don't necessarily see the benefit of keeping the Tech game. I don't necessarily see the benefit of it for Texas. I think that Tech would be huge for them, and so if you want to do them a favor, but it's a long enough. It's like Lubbock's far enough away. The weather in January, so you're gonna be doing it late in December, and make that trip up to Lubbock where you're just gonna get berated and hated on. I mean, maybe if you want to say a hostile environment to train you. Maybe you could sell that point to if you want to have the most hostile road environment in non-conference, it would be there. I mean, maybe you do Tech and you do it in at a neutral site. See, and then both fans will go, and then you make a bunch of money. Maybe that's the way to keep doing it with Tech. Maybe that'll work, where you don't necessarily have to travel to Lubbock every year, but you just do neutral site against Tech. I could get more bought into that one. Texter says Baylor, And the bad call helping KC again. I know people hate KC and they think they're getting all the refs calls. I think refs screw up enough either way. I didn't see anything in either game that led me to believe that it was, one team was getting overly helped. I think, Buffalo missed a field goal. And in the reality, there was a fumble that, if the Bills don't poke the ball out and get it away, is a pick six going the other way, and Josh Allen is the scapegoat again, and probably rightfully so. But that is, I'm not going to put that one on the refs. Me personally, I'm not going to. Oklahoma McGregor says Kansas only. That's a high-profile opponent that will likely be playing North Carolina or Duke. Yeah, I mean, and I get Kansas high profile, but Baylor was number 9 in the country. We just played. Like, Baylor's constantly a top 5, top 10 program. They were a national champion a few years ago. I get that Kansas holds a higher tier, but that means it's just going to be I think it's a bigger issue to play them. And you also have to fly to Kansas. It is a big game. I just don't know if for them, the rivalry's there either. I don't know if they care enough about Texas in basketball. They'd rather play a UNC or a Duke because those schools, are basketball schools, and Texas just historically isn't one. So they may want to do it, but I think, again, in all logic for me, sticks with Baylor. But I guess if you want to say you do neutral site with Tech and you want to put it in there where their fan bases are crazy and you could probably make a lot of money putting that somewhere because Tech fans will spend all the money to go out there, which will mean Texas fans will want to go spend money. And there's enough neutral site that if you did that somewhere, that it could be an interesting game. I don't know where you would do it, in Dallas or Houston or something like that, but that's an interesting one if you did a neutral site. I do want to play you a little Ian Robbie from Hook 'em Up this morning behind the burnt orange curtain. Keep those texts coming. We'll get back to them. 512-447-3776 is the text line. It's a little behind the burnt orange curtain. Always a good thing to check out with Rod Babers when he starts to break down some Texas. They talk a little Texas basketball in this as well. It's a Hook 'em Up replay here on the Sports Complex on the Horn.
All right, there are several headlines that I want to hit when we go behind the burnt orange curtain here. We didn't talk any of the recruiting nuggets, but it was a big recruiting weekend for the Longhorns this weekend. And they ended up getting a commitment for the 2025 class, a defensive lineman, Lance Jackson. He ends up being their 2025 the number 9 defensive lineman in the country. And over the course of the weekend, the junior days, they hosted a lot of different players. He decided to commit to the Longhorns. We spoke to him yesterday, actually, on the On Texas Football live stream, and asked him exactly, why did you choose Texas? What was the reason? And he essentially said it's PK. PK got such a great relationship with PK. Also a great relationship with Blake Gideon. Who I'm assuming was one of the lead recruiters, but he talked about PK and how, PK and he have such a great relationship that they don't talk about football oftentimes when they talk, that it's a very personal connection that they have, and that he's looking forward to coming here and playing for PK. That's why he wants to come here. And I think they have him, I believe, classified now as a buck in, as their buck in. So that's what they visualize for him coming in. But he's great. I mean, in terms of a natural raw pass rusher. I asked him about his pass rushing moves. He was like, I don't have any. I'm not joking. I asked him, I was like, what are your repertoire of pass rush moves? Because I just watching him, he didn't seem like he had any, and he admitted, he was brutally honest, said, I don't have any. I'm just bigger and stronger and faster. And that's what he said. I'm not joking. That's really good news, because you're going to teach him pass rushing moves. In addition to the freakish athleticism that he's being recruited for, you're going to teach him a repertoire of pass rushing moves. And once he starts learning that and executing those and cultivating those pass rushing moves, he's going to be even better. And what it tells me, though, is that they're recruiting pass rush ability. Remember, I told you some things you can't coach and you can't develop. You got to recruit those things you can't coach, you can't develop, can't coach coverage, can't coach pass rushing ability. I think it's a kind of a natural, innate trait. And he's one of those guys that can just kind of get after the passer naturally. And like, even though he's got no moves, I'm glad he was honest about that. Usually guys try to fake it. He's like, no, I'm just bigger, stronger, and faster than everybody else. So he just says he loves the way PK coaches. So 6'5". Actually, he said he's 6'6". He said everybody
plays tight end too, doesn't he?
Yeah, everybody keeps listening at 6'5". He says he's about 6'6".
And 245.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
about
he's a two-way player in Texarkana.
Yeah,
and he looks like a pretty good-looking tight end too. So just a really good athlete that's got that uncoachable size and length and explosiveness, and a good baseball player too, Rod.
Yeah, he said, actually, it's a great point you bring it up. He said his first love was baseball.
Yep.
He said his first love was baseball, and he ended up kind of settling into football because, I think it's more of his body. And he lives in Texas. Texas is hard to have a body like that and be an athlete like that, and coaches not be nudging you toward football all the time. He said his first love actually was baseball, and I believe he's still playing baseball.
Yeah.
He's actually still playing baseball, too. So he's a really good player and a great young man, too. But
very cool. On the On Texas Football channel, be checking that out for great content, talking to guys like that. And his brother plays at Arkansas, correct?
Yes, Landon Jackson, I believe is his brother's name, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, Landon Jackson is his brother's name. Yep, plays at Arkansas.
Cool.
And so he's, like I said, I think this is the type of guys they're going to start recruiting guys who can just naturally rush the passer. We'll teach him everything else. Teach him some pass rush moves. We'll teach him about taking on blocks to the right shoulder. We'll teach him about leverage. We can add weight, nutritionist, strength and conditioning. There are certain traits you've got to start, recruiting naturally, and he's one of those guys, I think. So good for him and good for Texas. I think that's a nice pickup by them. All right, other news. We were waiting on news about Coach Akina. At least now we know why he's not going to be an analyst at Texas, because he was being patient. Patience is a virtue, and it does pay off for Coach Akina. He is now has been announced over the weekend, I should say. He's now the defensive coordinator for Arizona. So Brent Brennan, the new head coach there, who was from San Jose State, has decided to name Coach Akina as their new defensive coordinator. So congrats to him. That means he won't be the defensive analyst for Texas. That would have been a hell of a that'd have been a hell of a get if Texas would have been able to get a guy of his ilk. And they've got some great ones, right? You had Gary Patterson, special assistant to the head coach. Paul Chryst is coming back as a special assistant to the head coach. I do think that William Gay, who they're bringing in as a defensive analyst, I guess once they got the Coach Akina news, they moved quickly. William Gay is a longtime NFL player, 12 years in the league total. 10 of those years with the Pittsburgh Steelers, 2 different stints with the Steelers. He was drafted originally by the Steelers, played his first contract with the Steelers, and then left to go to Arizona for 1 year, came back with the Steelers, and then the Steelers, after he was done playing, they brought him back again as a coaching intern. And that's Mike Tomlin the entire time. So Mike Tomlin's a big fan of. Mike Tomlin was my DB coach when I was with the Tampa Bay Bucks. So Mike Tomlin has a DB background, and he was known as being a defensive guru before he became a head coach. Dick LeBeau was his defensive coordinator. Dick LeBeau, known for being one of the greatest defensive minds in the history of football. So he had time to siphon a lot of information from 2 great defensive minds, one Mike Tomlin, one Dick LeBeau, and the Steelers organization, which is a organization about straight class homie. Right, they traded away a Super Bowl MVP because it was like, man, that guy's shady. They got rid of Antonio Brown too early, even though he was an All-Pro. Like, nah, man, we don't like the way this guy's conducting himself. They don't mess around, so he's gonna bring a nice culture with him too. He's aware of culture and how much it means. He won't be recruiting. He won't be an on-field coach. As an analyst, though, he can be a advanced scouting analyst for you, or he can do a lot of self-scouting for you. I think you should put him more in a self-scouting role right now. I would have him trying to come up with solutions and trying to come up with options for you to solve some of the troublesome concepts that you had trying to defend last season, that you had trouble defending last season, I should say, which was, bunch formations, inside breaking routes, your leverage was off a lot of the times. The deep ball, we saw that against Washington. Deep ball, they had issues defending the deep ball, panic plans. That's what I would do if I was Coach Sark. I'd put him on self-scouting with my DBs, trying to figure out ways to help those young DBs get a whole lot better. Makuba adding talent is going to help, but also I think conceptually, schematically, they need some help, some solutions to some of those troublesome concepts that really they never solved all season long. They were always rearing their ugly head.
Yeah, and that's a nice one. 12 years in the NFL, and it does feel like Sark keeps wanting to plug into the National Football League, bring Chris Jackson,
yep.
Tashard Choice with an NFL background before he got into college, William Gay, also now in, and we'll see if Rod Wright is the answer at defensive line coach.
Still haven't heard it. I mean, if
of course, Houston season ended on Saturday. We'll keep an eye on that. I'd also say, Rod, we were talking about defensive line depth as a concern for Texas, and I wonder if your new co-defensive coordinator has some ties back at Arizona, and what do you know? Tia Olaya Savea, Rod.
Yep.
Tia Olai.
Yeah.
Tia Olai. Savea had an official visit over the weekend, 6'4", 305.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, and he seemed like
2 years at Arizona. Was it at UCLA to start his career?
He seemed enthusiastic. Longhorn fans thought it was going to be a foregone conclusion that he was just going to commit the way he was posting on social media. But my friends over at On Texas Football with my man CJ Vogel and Bobby Burden, they said they have confirmed that no, he is not ready to commit. And I think a reason he may be hesitant is because they don't know who the D-line coach is going to be. Now, he could be different because he's got roots going back with Johnny Nansen. Right, you said Johnny Nansen recruited him.
Yeah, at UCLA.
And exactly, and it transferred over and was with him in his time in Arizona as well. So it could be different. And maybe he's not hesitant because he's got such a great relationship with Johnny Nansen, who's the co-DC now. But I will throw out there, I think it's going to be tough to bring in transfer portal additions on that D-line until you get a D-line coach.
Yeah, they want to know who their position coach is. Yeah. Anybody would.
Yeah.
So we'll keep an eye on that. I mean, obviously, if you're in on this player and you kind of know who you want, or you feel like you might want to. They might hear something today on that.
I think so. If it's an NFL guy, if it's Rod Wright, you should hear something pretty soon here.
Agreed.
Because their season's over with.
Yep, and got back from Baltimore on Saturday. We'll see if something comes from that situation. Good stuff right there, Rod. Behind the burnt orange curtain, we'll also talk more about Rodney Terry and hear from Rodney Terry after the big win, after Tyrese Hunter went coast to coast. What a ball game, by the way. I watched that game front to back. That was an awesome basketball game.
It was.
That was a really good basketball game.
It was a great game.
High scoring in the first half. Both teams shot the lights out in the first half. Defense improved in the second half. Both teams were in the 40s in the first half, and both teams struggled to get to 30 in the second. Both teams tightened up on D and ended up with Baylor making a rainbow three to tie it. Kid Bridges nails the three, but without calling a timeout. Tyrese Hunter goes coast to coast. A great pass by Dylan DeSue, Rod, to hit
nice.
Tyrese Hunter in stride, so he was running full speed, and it was kind of a Tyus Edney, old UCLA finish to lay that ball in and beat the buzzer.
Great play.
Great win, because you thought when he made that, you're thinking, oh, man, they may end up in overtime. That's not what you want against this Baylor team, and they end up getting the win. And that's the Tyrese Hunter they need the rest of the year out. A 21-point Tyrese Hunter who was red hot in the first half, played with energy, and that's the kind of defense they have to play, Rod.
Yeah.
The big keys for Texas in that. You got Dylan DeSue and Max Abmas doing normal things. Tyrese Hunter stepped up with 21. You only turned the ball over 7 times, and you played better defense. They held Baylor to 38% in the second half, after over 50 in the first half. Both teams were just red hot. That was an awesome basketball game. If that's more of the signs of things to come for Texas, don't give up on this Texas team just yet, because now they go to Oklahoma tomorrow night. Oklahoma's a top 20 team as well with Porter Moser. But I will remind Texas fans, as I mentioned in the 6 o'clock hour, through his first through this many games, Chris Beard's first year at Texas, he was 13-5, and it took him all the way to January to get a quad 1 win with essentially a brand new roster, learning to play together. Rodney Terry, 13-5, took till January 20th to post a quad 1 win over Baylor. We'll see, because that team ended up a 22-win team, went 22-12, made the tournament, and we know that the guts of that team all came back for the following year, and they made a run to the Final Four, almost to the Final Four. So we'll see. But yeah, Rodney Terry's got to keep that consistency. That's going to be the key now, okay? Because a lot of times in coaching, Rod, you on the football, okay, we've now seen it. That's it, guys. We played the kind of game we have to play. That second half is how we have to play. We're going to win games.
Don't let it be a flash.
Yes.
Start putting it together. It's going to be tough in the Big 12, though.
Yeah, it will.
No nights off.
You don't get any nights off. But at least you've played. We hadn't seen Texas play to that level yet.
At least they know they can do it.
They know they can do it.
It's possible.
And, okay, that's the recipe, y'all. And you know what? You've got to find something there, because Brock Cunningham didn't play much in the second half. Kendall Weaver played a bunch, the UT Arlington transfer, and he was making those hustle plays that were critical. Dylan DeSue was in foul trouble again, but the offense was kind of running through him. They're doing the 2-man game with he and Max Abmas, and then Tyrese Hunter getting his buckets off of that. So again, the recipe's there. Now Rodney Terry's got to keep it rolling. But we'll come back in the next hour, Rod, and play Rodney Terry's apology after the game.
He did. He apologized to I think his peers and to Longhorn fans. I believe it was directed towards.
Yeah, for the controversy after the Central Florida game. That it was the first time we got to hear from Rodney since that Tuesday night loss.
Guy.
All right. That was a great sound from Hook 'em Up with Ian Robbie behind the burnt orange curtain. We're going to take our last break. When we come back, wrap things up here for you on the Sports Complex in the Horn 1019 AM 1260, the Horn app, and hornfm.com. All right. Got to get out of here. Last couple texts. See, texter says, love Weaver's spark and hustle plays. How can you not? And Shan says Josh Allen should have checked down to Dawson Knox on last play. The field goal before the field goal would have been a closer field goal. Josh A still played lights out. Yep, it's kind of the knock is he tries to go for the home run every time. Doesn't know how to sometimes just hit the single up the middle. By the way, I did look, guys. Taylor Swift is playing the Saturday night at the Tokyo Dome. But they're 17 hours ahead of Vegas, and it's not 17 hours to fly back. So she could be at the Super Bowl. Then she has to fly to Australia. So just your Taylor Swift update, guys. I'm keeping up there because I know you guys care about it. Appreciate you guys listening. We'll be back to talk more actual sports tomorrow here on the Sports Complex. Until then, be kind, be safe, keep your underwear clean. We'll be right back here tomorrow with more of the Sports Complex.